Boys, we have an absolute banger of a fight this weekend in Kansas City between Carlos Prates and Ian Machado Garry, and I am super excited to give you my takes on it and my deep dive. But first, I want to talk to you guys about UFC 314. Now, I'm sorry that it was such a long wait. I went on vacation and I did not have any time to record a video, but I'm back and we are getting right into this. So, UFC 314, I didn't do too great on my main card picks. I got the main event right and I got Dominic Reyes correct. Everything else was pretty rough. I didn't do great, but hey, Volk got the belt back, so that is all that matters. I am so happy for him. The world is happy. Everyone's happy when Volk's the champion. So yeah, I just wanted to talk about that. It was an amazing card to watch. So yeah, without further ado, let's get right into Carlos Prates versus Ian Machado Garry. So, as a lot of you must know, this weekend the UFC is coming to Kansas City for a fight night, and it is an amazing card. We have Anthony Lionheart-Smith on the card, we have Giga Chikadze, David Onama. It's a great overall card, but the main event is super intriguing. We have Ian Machado Garry versus Carlos Prates, two up-and-comers in the welterweight division, and two guys who I think could become champion. This fight was super hard for me to predict. I've been watching a lot of tape on both of these guys, been watching their techniques, what they do good, what they do bad. So yeah, I'm going to get right into a deep dive on this. So we have Ian Machado Garry, who is 15-1, coming off of a loss against Shavkat Rakhmonov. And on the other side, we have Carlos Prates, who is 21-6, coming off of a win against Neil Magny due to knockout. So, like I said earlier, I think both of these guys are very good, and I think they honestly both have the tools to possibly become champion one day, depending on how this fight pans out. I really like both of these guys. I know Ian Garry has a lot of haters, and I think he's just a cocky guy. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think when you're as good as he is, you can be cocky. So, there will be no bias in this. I do like both guys. But let's go into a little background on both of them. So, Ian Garry is a very good all-around fighter. He has risen up to the occasion in multiple circumstances against Shavkat Rakhmonov. He was a underdog against Shavkat, and I would go as far as to say that he actually had a better fight than Shavkat did. I think that Shavkat obviously won the fight, but I think Ian Garry had more highlights in that fight. As we saw, he almost choked out Shavkat late in the fight. He did get hit by a pretty big right hand by Shavkat, but I think Ian Garry was playing very good defensively, and people are going to come in here and say, oh, Shavkat was injured that fight, he didn't have a full training camp, whatever they want to say. I think Ian Garry looked very good that fight, but let's move on over to Carlos Prates, who has the death touch in this division. He is one of the most powerful guys in this division, if not the most powerful, and a lot of people are picking him to knock out Ian Garry, and I don't completely hate that take. I don't know if Carlos Prates is that skilled of a fighter outside of his boxing. Now, I don't know, obviously, because he has never shot a takedown. He does not wrestle a lot. He ends the fight in 1 round or 2 rounds usually by knockout. That's just how powerful the guy is. But if I'm being completely honest, we do not know that much about Carlos Prates. And I don't know about his wrestling. I don't know about his jiu-jitsu. We don't really know about his clinching, any of that. We know that his boxing and his striking is very good. And now, I'm going to move on to some keys of victory for both of these guys if they want to win this fight. Now, let's start off with Ian Garry's keys to victory in this fight. I think the biggest thing that he has to focus on is not getting backed up against the fence. This is the most important thing. We've seen Carlos Prates knock out pretty much all of his opponents when they're up against the fence. Ian Garry cannot play too defensive and get walked down to the point where he's holding up his guard right by the fence, because that is where everyone gets dropped by Carlos Prates and usually finished. So I think the number one biggest thing is do not get backed up against the fence and do not play too defensively. I think that if he gets too defensive, he's just going to end up getting walked down and finished. I think another thing that he cannot do is go for panic takedowns, because if you go for panic takedowns against a guy like Carlos Prates, he's just going to stuff him and you're going to get up even more tired than you were before you shot the takedown, and he's going to finish you. Now, let's look at some things that Ian Garry needs to do to be able to beat Carlos Prates. The best things that Ian Garry can do in order to secure a win against Prates. So, number one biggest thing is capitalize on Carlos Prates' aggression. We all know Carlos Prates is always looking for that early brutal finish, and we all know that he can sometimes be very clumsy, and honestly, he can leave himself open, and he has not had a problem with that yet in the UFC because he hasn't really faced guys quite as good as Ian Garry, and Ian Garry's fight IQ is probably the best part of his game, and so I don't see Carlos Prates missing a huge shot and Ian Garry not capitalizing on the opening. Carlos Prates, when he misses those big strikes, when he's going for the finish, he leaves himself very, very wide open for counter strikes, and Ian Garry's really, really good at that. Now, another thing that I think is very, very important for Ian Garry is to be wary in the early rounds and test Prates' late game cardio. We have never seen Carlos Prates in a 5-round fight, and he barely even ever makes it to the 3rd round. So we don't know how good his cardio is. We don't know how good it's going to be. We can't say it's bad because we've never seen it past the 2nd or 3rd round. But I honestly don't think that he's preparing for this fight to go to the 4th, 5th round. And Ian Garry obviously has a lot of experience with that. So I think Ian Garry needs to, like I said, kind of with the Volk and Diego fight, Ian Garry needs to watch out for those early flurries of Carlos Prates, and eventually Prates, in my opinion, he will gas out and Ian Garry will look for the finish or the decision win. Now it's time to look at some ways that Carlos Prates can beat Ian Garry. So the number one thing that Carlos Prates has to be cautious of is his unknown gas tank. We don't know how long this fight's going to go, but we have to assume that it's going to go 5 rounds. At least that's what Carlos Prates has to assume. You always got to assume the worst. And Carlos Prates needs to be wary of that, and he honestly needs to go for a finish early. I think he has to use that leverage of aggression. Ian Garry does not have much aggression at all. Carlos Prates is the most aggressive guy I've seen fight in the octagon. So, I think he definitely needs to use that leverage against Ian Garry, because if he does not get a finish in the first 1, 2, or 3 rounds, we don't know how well it's going to go, because Ian Garry, as we've seen against Shavkat, against MVP, he gets better as the fight goes on, in my opinion. I think that, this is a guy that you got to be very careful of. We obviously know that Ian Garry has experience later in the fight, and Carlos Prates doesn't. So you have to be careful of your gas tank and utilize your aggressiveness. Another thing that he has to do is he has to exploit his reach and his Muay Thai experience. I think that Muay Thai is a very, very good base for a guy against Ian Garry, and especially that reach advantage that he has against Ian Garry. What he needs to do is do exactly what I said Ian Garry needs to avoid, is he needs to push Ian Garry back up against the fence, because that's where he gets all of his finishes. He can back away and avoid any counter strikes because his reach advantage is so much against Ian Garry that he will be able to go up against Garry and push him against the fence and possibly finish him. So yeah, those are some keys of victory for both guys. Now let's move on to what I think is going to really happen. Now, I'm going to make this one quick for you guys. Like I said way earlier in the video, I think this fight is going to be super, super close. But like I've always said throughout the video, I think the cardio might be too much for Carlos Prates. I think Ian Garry is smart enough not to get into those early striking exchanges, and I think Carlos Prates loses a lot of power as the rounds go by, as anyone does when their cardio goes down and they get gassed out. But yeah, I'm going to pick Ian Garry to get this one done by decision. But yeah, like I said, this fight could go either way. My personal prediction is that Carlos Prates looks good in the first few rounds, but then he gasses out and Ian Garry possibly catches him with a submission, but I think the more likely answer is a decision win. A lot of fence hugging, a lot of hugging on the ground, a lot of ground and pound by Ian Garry, and I don't think Carlos Prates will be able to compete on the ground. So yeah, I hope you guys like this video. Again, I'm really, really sorry for the long wait, and if you do like this video, make sure to subscribe, like, turn on notifications, whatever you want to do. So yeah, see you guys in the next one. Peace.